Hey everyone, this is Tom from VermiBag. This is the Mammoth 2 that I put the frozen and the unfrozen food in last week. This is the unfrozen side, so let's take a look at it. You can see there's quite a few sprouts that came up on this side. But take a look and see the material that was on the top is really well worked over, the newspapers and stuff I left on there. As far as material, you still see that cabbage in there. I mean, that was there from last week. The squash hasn't really broken down hardly at all since it wasn't frozen. And I still have chunks of carrots. But the rest of the material I put in there seems like it's pretty much gone. I don't see any of the peppers or worm population. I mean, it's really, really good. There's part of an avocado. I mean, the worms are really into this material. It's just the items like this just did not break down. I mean, this squash, if I'd stuck this in the freezer and then put it in here, I know it'd be gone. But the worms are all over this stuff, and I'm actually really surprised. I don't really notice much of a difference in population, I don't think, from this side and the other. I mean, we'll take a look at it today, but from last week, I mean, there's a huge amount of worms over here, yet there's all this material in here that hasn't broken down yet, but the worms are all over it. So, I mean, I guess it's just, you know, the one advantage I do see from putting the unfrozen stuff in is it doesn't heat up. I didn't have this side heating up hardly at all, whereas the frozen side, I definitely had a fair amount of heat generated. It wasn't enough to be concerned about right now, but the temperatures really came down from over the summer. If I was in the middle of the summer, I don't think I'd get away with what I'm doing without doing some kind of measures to keep the temperatures down. But other than the cabbage and the squash, you know, you see an occasional piece of skin like that, but for the most part, they pretty well work through everything. So, pretty interesting. Let's take a look at the frozen side and see what it looks like. Okay, this is the frozen side. I mean, it's really worked over. I mean, this is super smooth. You can tell that the top of this is just really fine castings and stuff as they've gone through here. But look at the worm density and also how much food's left in this thing. A lot of worms. You know, I'm going to say the density is pretty similar to the other side. I don't see any food. They're definitely working the material really well. The bedding's really broken down a lot too. Avocado shells there, but there's a little piece of something. Sure exactly what it is, but I mean, good density of worms. They're looking real healthy. Some of them are getting pretty doggone fat. Again, there's some tiny little remnants of some of the real fibrous stuff that's left in the material, but I'm going to say all the material's gone. I could definitely feed it again. So I don't know. You know, I mean, to draw a conclusion on that, there's absolutely no doubt that the frozen material, they go through the material faster. I think maybe selectively choosing the things you want to freeze and things you don't want to freeze. I did notice more bugs in here, though, for sure. I do have these little flying beetle type things. I mean, it's kind of like Emily's worst nightmare. But overall, I learned a lot. Again, the unfrozen side didn't heat up hardly at all. Whereas the frozen side, I mean, this stuff definitely starts to hot compost unless you're pretty careful. But yet the worms will go through this material awful fast. So I mean, you can do both ways you want. I mean, I'm going to continue to normally freeze my material and put it in. Part of it's because I end up with a large quantity of material at one time and I can't use it all, so I need to store it. So the freezer acts as my storage, and that just gives me an amount of food that I can, continuously pull out of. I go down, I pick up 100 pounds of scraps, and so I process them, put them in the freezer. I'm going to hopefully this weekend pick up 20 or 30 pumpkins, process those and put them in the freezer as well. So interesting. I'm going to go ahead and feed this thing probably. I'm not going massive on this, probably about 20 pounds or so today. And I'm going to start working on the other video and take a look at doing a massive feeding on the other bag, on the Mammoth 1. So that's it from VermiBag. This is Tom. Till next time, ciao.